Today, I want to talk about how we see and realize no self. People ask, "Yeah, so I get it intellectually. I see it intellectually, but like I understand it intellectually. But how do I see it as an insight? Is this word insight, right? How is there this deep knowing? Vigya in Pali. Is this direct knowing is how that word's actually translated. What are the methods to this direct knowing? What do I do to come to this direct knowing? And actually, the question indicates a deep insight already, because the questioner already has the insight that this isn't an intellectual exercise, that this is something that's known at a deeper level. And that's huge, because a lot of people will go through years and years and years of Dharma practice thinking that it's, the more books they read and the more knowledge they accumulate, that the closer they'll get to the truth, as we're talking about it in this group. So it's not about concepts. I guess I say that enough that it'd be impossible to continue to have that notion in this group, at least, that it's really not about concepts. The concepts are helpful because they provide like a framework, right? A structure. The Buddha gave lots of concepts. He's the master of lists, as we like to joke. He's got more lists than any spiritual teacher ever. There's 4 of this, 5 of that, 3 of that. There's just 7 of this, and there's constantly these structures, right? And he was always giving new ones, pointing to the same truth, but giving new structures depending on the audience. So these concepts are helpful. They kind of provide, I used to say, the scaffolding. I don't know if that's quite correct, but it's kind of more the foundation, or the framework within which we can know directly. So even with this insight that it's not an intellectual exercise, seeing and realizing can seem elusive, right? Can seem almost impossible to some, and there's reasons why it's difficult. First, the fiction of the self is always at the center. Even the seeking to know the truth, the self will remain at the center. Right? The self's always going to want to be there. Yeah, I'm in for this. We're going to realize the truth, and yeah, it's going to be real cool. I'm going to realize, they want to come along for the ride. So the self is always remaining at the center. So it's really hard for the mind to see the fiction of this. These processes that we call the egoic self. The egoic mind can't comprehend itself as anything other than a self. You really comprehend yourself as anything other than a self? Self's always, it could be a self that's enlightened, a self that's more compassionate. The self's it can't comprehend itself in any other way. So that's why it's difficult. It's seeing the fiction of that very foundational notion of the self. And second is the thing that terrifies the self the most is seeing the fiction of itself. This is the most terrifying thing. And so it will resist and withdraw. That's when, during the guided meditations, if you notice when you're actually getting close to something deep, have you noticed that there's often this flurry of thinking? There's a real resistance. All this story about something a friend did 30 years ago might just suddenly appear, and you haven't thought about it for a while, and you just go, "That's baffling." Why does that arise in that particular moment? So there's either a withdrawal or a real resistance. Because it's terrifying to the self. So how do we look into the nature of our experience and see and realize no self? I'm really going to focus on the seeing part Because there's a difference between seeing and realizing. For example, you can see an apple and know it in a particular way by looking at it. But actually taking a bite of an apple and chewing it is a completely different experience. And that's, I guess, a metaphor you could use for the difference between seeing and realizing. But seeing is really the doorway, the access point to the realizations and to the insight. So really, when we practice, the methods we practice are really all about seeing. And just a proviso before we get into this too far, as we do this work, is to drop everything you know. And I've said that, this would be a notion of beginner's mind or don't know mind. Knowledge is always about the past. It will hinder your ability to discover your true self. It's actually a hindrance. So begin with the mindset of not knowing anything. So you've got this kind of structure, and that's it. Those are the only concepts you need. You start with this mindset of not knowing anything and just using the teacher's teachings as pointers, as a kind of guide to your exploration of your personal experience. And don't judge what you see and avoid kind of reacting to what you're seeing. Just simply allowing it. More thoughts just create more mental structures, more concepts, more complexity. So we're simply just kind of staying truthful to ourselves, not deceiving ourselves. Just a genuine looking, really without an agenda, you could say. The only agenda is this kind of structure that we're bringing into it. And with this, the insights will spontaneously arise. The realizations spontaneously arise. I think one of the reasons I really like to travel is because it gets me out of the kind of comfort zone, I guess you could say, or the routine that I can be in when I'm at home. There's always so much happening that it's all Dharma teaching, right? There's always, every day there was somebody that was showing true compassion. I'd come across just somebody in a supermarket. And we came across a woman in a supermarket. We told her we were going to Milford Sound, and she said with this big smile, "I hope it pours rain." And I kind of all looked at her, and I didn't know that when you're in Milford Sound, there's 1,000 waterfalls everywhere you look when it's pouring rain. Of course, when it's not raining, it's just beautiful mountains in the fjord and the water. So it did pour rain, and we all knew what she was talking about. But she didn't tell us that. She just said, "I hope it pours rain," with this big smile. That's just an example of just a moment of compassion. And at the same time, the same day, you'll see egoic minds, right? Tourists can be very like, "I got to see this and I got to see." So you also see the egoic mind, and you see that although they're trying to find happiness and seeing everything or seeing this and that, they're actually suffering. So you can see that too. So you kind of see the whole, as John Kabat-Zinn calls it, the full catastrophe, the good, the bad, and the not so good or bad, if that's a way to put it. So that's, I think, and you can really see that for yourself in your daily practice when you're out in the world. The other thing I'd like to say before I get into it, and I'm halfway through the time and I'm just getting into it, but is this can all be looked at in terms of the context of the Eightfold Path. There's a reason it was the first teaching of the Buddha. There's a reason that he said there's suffering. This is see the cause of suffering. See that there's a method to the cessation of suffering, and here's the method. And for years, I kind of thought, this seems like a really simple outline, right? I mean, we've got the two wisdom parts of it, the right or complete view and complete thought. You've got the three kind of ethical aspects of right action, right speech, and right livelihood. And then you've got the three kind of wisdom practice aspects of right mindfulness, right concentration, and right effort. So it looks, you kind of look at that and think, oh, it's really kind of simple. But it's not, it's very deep. And I think any methods that we bring in, that structure can be very helpful in keeping touch with that there's these wisdom practices, that there's these ethical practices and mind training, and our mind training. So I'd like to put that out there as well, because it really underpins any methods that we might be moving to see the truth of no self. So whatever I say, you can kind of put it into that framework as well. So you can take the 5 aggregates, which we've been talking about in my absence, as kind of a framework for saying, oh, can I find a self in any of these? And then you can kind of practice with that within the context of the Eightfold Path. And I think there's a reason that right view is the first on the list. I remember when Lama Suridas, I went to a retreat with him, and he said, everything starts with right view. And he said that we've all had, and I said, well, don't you have to see through these other practices, right view? How can you start with it, right? And the insight mind kind of goes that to, because everybody's had a glimpse of it. Everybody's had a glimpse of it. So we start with that those tastes or glimpses that we've had of the truth of our true nature. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about 3 methods. And I've just made this up, so it might not be a complete. I'm sure you'll come up with other ways. But I just kind of, when I thought about it, I thought there's kind of 3 ways that I practice. One is my meditation practice, which is invaluable. We have as I would recommend, a morning meditation, at least, maybe an afternoon as well. I got away from it a little bit while I was traveling. See, that happens. And I noticed how it shifted my grounding if I went without meditating for a couple of days. My wife would see it, and she'd actually know that before we got up in the morning that I was going to meditate that morning, because she saw that I was a little bit less grounded, right? And so we'd get up and she'd go, so you're going to meditate, and then we're going to go, how'd she know I was going to meditate? So of course I was going to meditate, and then we were going to have breakfast and continue on. And the group kind of got into a little bit of a vibe of that too, that there was this kind of pause from our, moving about. And so the meditation is a key part of the practice. And I started listing all the types of meditations and how to do them. And there's just this huge list, from awareness of breath, choiceless awareness, resting in awareness, the 4 Brahma-viharas, the metta, compassion, equanimity, sympathetic joy, there's Tonglen, and the list just goes on. There's walking meditation. And I'd like to kind of go into some of those and look at how crucial they are in the practice. Walking meditation for me has been a huge one. So I'll probably talk about that quite a bit. So just meditation in general, and what we do in meditation. We just did a guided meditation at the beginning. I hope you saw how simple that was, just to look at thoughts, look at the sounds, and just see that they're just arising and passing through without your consent. So you can see right there in that one sentence, impermanence and no self. And you see it, and you see it. it dawns on you, which is really what an insight is, that this is actually it. This is the truth of existence, of reality, the fiction that's been created in the egoic mind. So there's meditation. The second is contemplation. Contemplation. So it's a process of taking a phrase or a teaching and listening. Saint Benedict calls it listening with the ear of the heart, if that makes any sense. So Saint Benedict kind of has this process called lectio divina, which is kind of like the five aggregates, in that you're looking for what's not true. So I'm not the self, the body is not self. So you're kind of looking at the process of seeing what's not true. So I'm going to go through the 5 steps of lectio divina, the approach of Saint Benedict, and then we'll look at that as a way of practicing contemplation. See if it resonates with you. It's something that Matthew Flickstein taught me, and we used it. I did a year-long training where that's all we did was take teachings and use that approach. I did a similar thing, and this is a lot of fun if you ever get the chance. We didn't use Zoom, we used Skype, and we were on headphones. This was decades ago, and we would just take a Buddhist teaching, a sutta. We would all read it, and then somebody would read it out loud, and then we would just reflect on it. And we use a similar kind of approach. So it's a way of taking texts and teachings and kind of contemplating them and absorbing them. It's not so much a thinking, figuring out, it's a listening with the ear of the heart rather than the mind. So there's meditation, contemplation, and then the third one is investigation. We've talked about investigation here before, and it really is a thread throughout your meditation, right? You always are bringing this investigative quality into your meditations. But I brought it as a kind of third category, is because we can also really bring it into our daily life. This wasn't something that I thought I would say, but it just occurred to me that I think I've probably had more seeing from investigating what's happening in my life than I have from my meditation practice, including retreats. And I still think that's the case. And you really don't know, right? You don't know what's percolating and what's. But I really do take my daily meditation practice very seriously. I'm continuously remembering to observe and investigate, to see what's true about what's arising in my personal experience, and as the Buddha said, both internally and externally, what's arising around me. So it's investigation is being curious, bring that really intense curiosity to what is happening in the present moment. Really just kind of shining a light on it. And it's we have to be careful we don't slip into the discursive mind and start analyzing and so on. So we're going to look at each one of these in detail, one by one. We'll see how it goes. and really look at how we can practice meditation, contemplation, and investigation so that we can really see the truth for ourselves. We can see the three marks of existence. We can see dukkha, anicca, and anatta, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, another way to put it, impermanence, and no self. We can see those within the aspects of what we think are a self. I hope you could really engage with those aggregates, because those are really, of the Buddha's list, those for me were one of those two, the three marks of existence and the five aggregates, very powerful practice, a very powerful practice framework for me personally. And just seeing, I really, really thought I was my thoughts. I mean, academic wouldn't or doesn't, right? It's just kind of the mind and and this my viewpoint, my opinion. These were what constituted who I was and what this self was. So, and for others, it may be other aspects of the five aggregates are sort of more prominent or powerful. I think thoughts for many of us are a pretty strong one. Thoughts, emotions for others, other mental formations, and then looking at the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral arising, just being able to be very on top of, or very continuous in noticing when how pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral can quickly morph into grasping and pushing away, suffering. I hope we can move through this, and we can really actualize those frameworks, and we can do so as we do. We notice too when there is resistance. As I said, the egoic mind will resist quite strenuously to the notion of its the reality of its fiction, of its illusory nature. You see why? And it's even when you know that that's going to happen, it still happens, and you can't stop it from happening. So all you can do is kind of go, oh, there it is happening. So, when you hear teachers say, don't resist the resistance, it sounds like a really kind of just a phrase, but it's so important to take that to heart in your practice and not resist the resistance, not judge the resistance, and just notice that, oh, there it is. Happening. It's what's arising. Nothing wrong. It's not that it's not supposed to happen. It's just what's happening.